In the history of humanity, many martyrs have stood out, but who was the first to sacrifice their own life out of love for God? Imagine a young man full of faith who did not hesitate to place his convictions above everything else. The courage of a heart that beat fervently for a greater purpose. And if I told you that this act of bravery echoed through the centuries, inspiring millions to follow the same path, this character, although he lived in ancient times, still resonates in our lives today. What led him to such a radical decision? What were the reactions to his act of faith? It is fascinating to think about how his story intertwines with our spiritual journey. The truth is that his legacy remains alive, challenging us to reflect on what we are willing to do for our beliefs. Stay tuned, because the revelation of this martyr is just the beginning. A story of deep love, courage, and indomitable faith that can change the way we see our own devotion. Get ready to dive into a tale that, although ancient, is eternally relevant. When we talk about the term martyr, an image of sacrifice and devotion immediately comes to mind. In a religious context, especially in Christianity, a martyr is someone who renounces their life in the name of their faith. This surrender is not just an act of courage, but a profound demonstration of belief in something greater. Martyrs are often seen as examples of faithfulness to God, serving as inspiration for other followers. The word martyr has roots in the Greek martis, which means witness. Thus, being a martyr goes beyond death. It is about being a witness to faith in extreme circumstances. The figure of the martyr stands out in various religious traditions, but in Christianity, it has gained a special significance. Christian martyrs are often celebrated for their willingness to face death rather than renounce their beliefs. This idea of testimony is central to the understanding of Christian faith, where the life and death of Jesus Christ are seen as the greatest example of sacrifice and redemption. Therefore, the definition of martyr is not limited to death, but extends to a life lived in obedience and dedication to God. In early Christianity, martyrs were considered true heroes of faith. They were often venerated, and their stories were told to encourage the community to remain steadfast in their beliefs, even in the face of adversity. The death of a martyr was seen as a powerful testimony that could galvanize the faith of others. Martyrdom, then, becomes a symbol of spiritual resistance and commitment to the teachings of Christ. The idea of martyrdom also brings up issues of injustice and oppression. Many times, martyrs faced brutal persecutions, and their stories reveal the tensions between beliefs and secular powers. This struggle is not limited to the past. The issues surrounding martyrdom continue to resonate in current contexts, where people still face persecution for their beliefs. Thus, the concept of martyr becomes a link between the past and the present, offering a reflection on the cost of faith. Reflecting on the definition of martyr, we realize that this term encapsulates a rich tapestry of meaning and experience. It invites us to ponder what it means to live a life of genuine faith and the implications it can have. Martyrs teach us the importance of courage and integrity in difficult times, showing that true faith can require significant sacrifices. Stephen is a central figure in the narrative of early Christianity, widely recognized as the first Christian martyr. His story, which appears in the book of Acts of the Apostles, reveals not only his background, but also the nature of his ministry and his fervent defense of the Christian faith. Stephen was a man of deep faith, described as full of grace and power, performing signs and wonders among the people. His background, although not widely discussed, indicates that he was one of the 7 deacons chosen by the apostles to help in the administration of the Christian community, especially in caring for the needy. Stephen's ministry was marked by his ability to communicate the message of Christ clearly and convincingly. He not only cared for the poor, but also stood up to preach and teach about Jesus. His eloquence and courage in sharing the Christian message attracted the attention of many, but also provoked the anger of some religious leaders and authorities who saw his actions as a threat to the established order. Stephen dedicated himself to work that, although altruistic, challenged the norms and expectations of society at the time. His impact was so significant that it aroused the animosity of opposing groups who did not hesitate to use dishonest strategies to silence him. Stephen became the target of accusations, being accused of speaking against the temple and the law of Moses. These accusations were fueled by people who, instead of debating ideologically, opted to manipulate the truth, presenting false witnesses to delegitimize his testimony and message. This situation not only highlighted the tension between emerging Christianity and traditional Judaism, but also reflected the climate of hostility that permeated the time. Stephen's life is a powerful reminder of how the pursuit of truth can often lead to intense conflicts. He was willing to face opposition, holding firm to his convictions. His determination to preach the message of Christ, even under pressure, illustrates the depth of his faith and commitment to the teachings he had absorbed. Stephen's story, therefore, is not just about an individual, it is about the struggle of a movement that sought to legitimize a new form of worship and understanding of God. Stephen's narrative also leads us to reflect on the relationship between faith and courage. His willingness to put himself at risk, to face judgment and accusations, is a demonstration of a purpose-driven firmness that resonates to this day. Stephen's life thus becomes an inspiring example for many who find themselves in challenging situations because of their beliefs, showing that true faith is not without risks, but is often forged in the heat of adversity. The accusations against Stephen did not arise out of nowhere. They were the result of a tense political and religious context. The scenario of the time was marked by transition and transformation, with emerging Christianity challenging established Jewish traditions. Stephen's message, which included claims about the surpassing of the temple and the new covenant in Christ, was seen as a direct threat to the religious authority of Jewish leaders. As a result, he became an easy target for those who wished to discredit his influence. False witnesses played a crucial role in the process that led Stephen to trial. These people, driven by self-interest or a desire to maintain the status quo, presented distorted accounts of his words and actions. This manipulation of truth is a recurring theme in the history of martyrdom, showing how injustice can be fueled by dishonesty and greed. Witnesses claimed that Stephen was profaning the temple and speaking against the law of Moses, accusations that immediately provoked the anger of religious leaders. Stephen's trial unfolded before the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Council of the Jews, which was responsible for dealing with religious and civil matters. The atmosphere was charged, with palpable tension between the Sanhedrin members and the accused. Stephen, however, maintained a firm and courageous posture, ready to defend his faith. The environment was hostile, and the outcome of the trial seemed decided before it even began, showing how the pursuit of truth can be compromised when personal interests are at stake. The political context of the time also cannot be ignored. Palestine was under Roman rule, and tensions between Jews and Romans were high. Religious leaders feared that the growing popularity of Christianity could incite the wrath of Roman authorities and result in reprisals against the Jewish community. Therefore, Stephen's condemnation became a strategy to maintain peace and order, even if it meant sacrificing truth and justice. Stephen's trial is a poignant example of how faith can be tested under adverse circumstances. He faced a system more interested in silencing dissenting voices than seeking truth. His fate, marked by unjust accusations, reveals the complexities of interactions between beliefs, politics, and power, and invites us to reflect on what it really means to defend faith in a world that often values conformity over truth. At the moment Stephen stands before the Sanhedrin, the atmosphere is tense. He knows his fate is at stake, but instead of being intimidated, he takes the floor with courage and eloquence. His speech is a true defense of the Christian faith, where he not only exposes his beliefs, but also recounts the history of Israel, connecting it with the message of Jesus. He begins by recalling the journey of the Hebrew people, from Abraham to the construction of the temple, emphasizing the promises made by God and how the people often strayed from them. Stephen does not hesitate to criticize the religious leaders of the time, calling them resistant to the Holy Spirit. He makes a powerful connection between the history of Israel and the rejection of Jesus, the Messiah. For him, this rejection is not new. It repeats throughout the centuries. He brings up figures like Moses and the prophets, showing how there has always been resistance from the people and their leaders in accepting God's revealed truth. By doing this, Stephen not only defends his faith, but also challenges the members of the Sanhedrin to reflect on their own actions. The speech is a true narrative that unfolds with passion and clarity. Stephen talks about how God has always been present in the people's history, even when they deviated from the path. He mentions the construction of the temple, a symbol of worship, but also argues that God does not dwell in temples made by human hands. This statement must have echoed powerfully among the listeners, as it challenges the foundation of what they believed about the relationship between God and the place of worship. As Stephen progresses in his speech, he becomes increasingly incisive. He says that God's truth cannot be confined to a physical space, and that, like their ancestors, the current generation was making the same mistake of rejecting God's word. His courage to speak out in this way before a court that had the power to condemn him is admirable. He does not become a martyr out of weakness, but out of unshakable firmness in his convictions. Therefore, Stephen's speech is not just a defense, but an appeal to the conscience of those present. He challenges the way they view the relationship between God and the people, and this undoubtedly disturbs them. The eloquence and passion with which he speaks, combined with his willingness to face death for his beliefs, make his speech a milestone in Christian history, remembered as an example of unwavering faith. The moment of Stephen's martyrdom is one of the most dramatic and emotional in Christian narrative. After his intense and provocative speech, the reaction of the crowd is immediate and violent. His words, which were a defense of faith and a call for change, fall like fire on the souls of the listeners. They are not willing to hear the truth. Instead, anger and indignation take over. Stephen is dragged out of the city where the death sentence is pronounced. The stoning is a brutal and inhumane act, and the scene is marked by intense emotional charge. While the stones are thrown, Stephen maintains a surprising posture of peace. He looks to heaven and sees the glory of God and Jesus standing at his right hand. This moment is powerful and symbolizes a direct connection with the divine, something that could be considered a consolation in the midst of suffering. This heavenly vision not only reaffirms his faith, but also demonstrates that he is not alone, even in the face of death. The crowd, taken by fury, continues to throw stones, but Stephen's reaction is even more impressive. He calls out to God, asking not to hold the sin against them, echoing the words of Jesus on the cross. This attitude of forgiveness is one of the most notable aspects of his martyrdom. Stephen shows that love and compassion are more powerful than violence and hatred. His death transforms into a testimony of faith and forgiveness, challenging the human values of the time. Stephen's martyrdom does not occur in a vacuum. He is surrounded by a crowd mostly seeking vengeance and self-righteous justice. Among them are witnesses observing the scene with various reactions. Some might feel uncomfortable with Stephen's courage, while others feel justified in their violence. The emotional impact of this act extends beyond the moment, leaving an indelible mark on Christian history. After his death, Stephen's figure transforms into a symbol of resistance and faith. His willingness to face death for his beliefs not only inspires Christians of the time, but also sets in motion a series of events that would shape the future of the Church. Stephen's martyrdom is thus more than an isolated act. It is the beginning of a new era of persecution and, at the same time, the strengthening of Christian faith, showing that love and truth can prevail even in the most difficult circumstances. Stephen's martyrdom was not just a tragic event, it became a crucial milestone in the history of Christianity. After his death, Christians in Jerusalem faced increased persecution, but interestingly, it was this persecution that drove the spread of the faith. Stephen's example, a man who gave his life for his beliefs, inspired many to remain steadfast in their faith despite adversity. This phenomenon is a powerful testament to how pain and sacrifice can catalyze the growth of a religious movement. Reports of Stephen's martyrdom quickly spread among Christians, serving as a call to action. At a time when the Christian community was still very young and vulnerable, Stephen's courage before the Sanhedrin and his willingness to face death for his faith served as motivation for many others. The result was a strengthening of Christian identity, which came to be understood not just as a new sect within Judaism, but as a distinct and resilient movement. This new perception helped shape the early church, which was beginning to establish itself in the religious landscape of the time. Additionally, Stephen's death had an unexpected side effect: the dispersion of Christians. With the increase in persecution, many Jewish converts to Christianity fled Jerusalem, taking their beliefs and practices with them. As they traveled, they shared their experiences and teachings, contributing to the growth of the church in regions such as Samaria and even beyond, to places like Greece and Rome. This phenomenon of dispersion became one of the factors that allowed the Christian message to spread rapidly, reaching new audiences and cultures. Thus, Stephen's figure became a symbol of resistance and unwavering faith. His story was told and retold, inspiring others to stand up against oppression and persecution. The narrative of his martyrdom not only highlighted the brutality of Christian persecution, but also the determination and spiritual strength that emerged from these circumstances. The impact of his death resonated for generations, shaping how Christians saw themselves and how they related to the society around them. Stephen's martyrdom is a testament to the complex relationship between faith and suffering. While many may see persecution as an obstacle, Stephen and his story teach that it is often through suffering that the true value of faith is revealed. This lesson continues to be relevant for Christians today, reminding them that even in the midst of adversity, it is possible to find strength and purpose. Stephen's legacy transcends his life and death. He becomes an eternal symbol of Christian faith. His willingness to face martyrdom in the name of his beliefs set a standard for those who came after him. In many Christian traditions, Stephen is considered the proto-martyr, the first to sacrifice his life for Christ, and this granted him a special place in church history. His courage became a model of faith, an example many Christians strive to emulate in their own lives. In Christian communities, Stephen is often remembered and celebrated, especially on his feast day, December 26th. This recognition is not merely a formality, it is a moment of reflection on what it means to be faithful in difficult times. The stories of his life and martyrdom are recounted in sermons, Bible studies, and liturgical celebrations, always with the aim of inspiring new followers to remain steadfast in their faith. Stephen is seen not just as a historical figure, but as a spiritual presence that continues to guide and inspire. Stephen's impact also extends to Christian theology. His passionate defense of the faith, expressed in his speech before the Sanhedrin, is often cited as an example of eloquence and conviction. Scholars and theologians study his words not only for their content, but also for the way he articulated the narrative of salvation, connecting Israel's history to Jesus' ministry. This has sparked deep debates and reflections on the nature of faith and the relationship between Christianity and Judaism. Furthermore, Stephen's figure serves as a powerful reminder of the cost of faith. In a world where religious freedom is not always guaranteed, Stephen's story continues to resonate, reminding Christians of the importance of standing firm in their convictions. He represents those who, in various parts of the world, face similar persecutions because of their faith. Stephen's legacy, therefore, is not just about a man who died for his beliefs, but about a community that strengthens and unites around a common ideal. Stephen's memory is also a call to action. He encourages Christians to be defenders of the faith, to stand up against injustices, and to cultivate a spirit of courage and compassion. His legacy is a heritage that continues to influence the church, reminding everyone that even in the face of adversity, faith can be a transforming force. Stephen, the first martyr, is thus a light that continues to shine, guiding many on their spiritual journey. As we explore the life and sacrifice of Stephen, the first martyr in the Bible, we are reminded that courage and faith can lead us to unexpected paths. Imagine having the determination to face adversity, knowing that your belief might cost you everything. What a powerful example he left us. Now, I invite you to reflect, how can we apply this same courage in our daily lives? Are we ready to defend our faith, even in the face of challenges? Think of the strength Stephen showed, even when the stones began to fly. What if you were in that place? What would you say? What message would you carry? And remember, Stephen's story is not just about sacrifice, but also about the hope he brought to many around him. What legacy do you wish to leave? How can you be a light in a world that needs it so much? If you enjoyed this theme, don't forget to comment below your impressions and experiences. Who knows, your story might inspire someone else. And stay tuned, because soon we will explore more incredible figures from the Bible who teach us to live with purpose and passion. Until next time.